Thank you.
Perfect, because I think everybody loves you, so this is starting off to a great start.
Thank you, girls. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause, everybody. High five. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, high five, high five, high five. Good job, good job. Okay, good job. I like that.
Okay, I'm going to switch microphones here because I'm going to make a few announcements as to how this is going to go. Turn that one off.
Okay.
Okay, let's try this. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so the way this is going to work out to keep this really fair and equitable, because there are enough of you here, and I'm sure there are lots of questions, we are going to ask you to keep, well, firstly, thank you for joining us on this Saturday afternoon, on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, when there are many other things you could be doing, especially on Father's Day weekend, to all of you dads in the audience. As I started to say, to keep this fair and equitable for everyone and make sure everyone has a chance to ask their question, we are going to draw in some announcements and telling you what's happening in Washington, and when he's ready, we will then start our Q&A.
Ready. All right. How's everybody doing? It's great to see you all. Well, first of all, let's give a round of applause to Misty and all the volunteers that made this event happen today. Are we on? Better? Oh, much better. Okay, I can be loud, though, so y'all can hear me. Well, first of all, let me just say this is the most comfortable seating for any town hall that we have ever done. Isn't this an amazing facility here? They have really done a tremendous job here at the outlets in San Clemente. It is our first town hall at an outlet mall. It is our 89th town hall overall, and I'm very, very grateful to be with you all on this Saturday. And it really takes a great team in order to be able to pull that off, all the scores of house parties and town hall meetings and all the rest. And again, I just want to say thank you to our entire team. I also want to give a shout out. We've got some people who are serving in office and running for office. I see my dear friend Amy Hanachek here from the Capistrano Unified School District. Amy, thank you for all your wonderful work. And I see Kim Carr. Kim, you want to stand? Kim is running for office herself. And definitely go talk to Kim about her campaign as well. You know, I know there are a lot of places, as Misty said, that you could be here on Father's Day weekend. By the way, in advance, happy Father's Day to all the dads. I'm a father myself of 2 young kids. My wife and I have a 9-year-old, soon to be 10, and an 8-year-old. And so I definitely want to say happy Father's Day. Also to my dad, if he is watching, really want to say I love you and happy Father's Day, Dad. I want to just give you a few updates. It's obviously a very crazy time, a difficult time. I want to remind you about Juneteenth. You know, that is a new federal holiday that we passed last year on an overwhelmingly bipartisan basis to celebrate the end of slavery in America. And for me, it's also a reminder that the fight for equality, the fight for justice is certainly not over. But nonetheless, it'll be a great celebration on Monday. I hope you had a chance to get one of these handouts on the way in. You see one of these handouts? Mine's all folded up because I had it in my pocket. So it is a map of a lot of the different areas in our beautiful congressional district. I can take no credit for the artwork either. But what it has are a number of the different projects that we've gotten to come to fruition throughout our 3 years in Congress, including $9.3 million for more sand on the beaches in San Clemente. I was very, very happy we delivered that. And of course, we've delivered results like that up and down our district. And I think the back of the brochure is especially important to me because it sort of encapsulates my philosophy of the job, which is that my focus has been, is, and will continue to be to actually get things done for the district as opposed to scoring political points. I think you have far too many members of Congress who are interested in how many likes and retweets and cable news appearances they are going to make as opposed to how many bills they get into law or how many dollars they can deliver for the important projects in the district. So I try to be a workhorse rather than a show horse, and I hope you understand that's how I feel. I want to jump right in and talk about something that's on my mind, I think probably on your minds and also for those watching at home, and that's inflation and rising costs. I think it's important to remember where we were not that long ago when the pandemic hit in 2020. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, roughly 16.9 million people lost their jobs. Think of that, about 17 million people. Tens of thousands of businesses held on for as long as they could, but some had to close, and some closed permanently. So the House and the Senate took action by passing something called the American Rescue Plan. We needed to help millions of Americans put food on the table and help pay the bills. Many were struggling to make ends meet. We were also in a position to help millions of American businesses, as I just mentioned, both big and small. We're talking about restaurants and bars and gyms and retail stores, family farms and large companies that employ thousands of people right here in the 49th District and in districts like it all throughout the United States. I still get calls from the businesses in our community that were helped during that period of time, whose doors were able to stay open during that period of time. And all of that resulted in millions of people being able to go back to work once we reopened. And I am extremely proud that we now have the largest job growth and the lowest unemployment in a generation, and that we're also starting to reduce our nation's deficit as well. But all of the demand, as I think we all know, has put a huge strain on everything from materials to manufacturing to shipping to transport. You throw in high fuel costs, and everything is more expensive as a result. These high costs are affecting every single one of us. Certainly, for me, I do a lot of the grocery shopping in my family. You'll see me at our local Trader Joe's or at our local Costco, and there's no question that the price of a gallon of milk or a dozen eggs or a loaf of bread or a gallon of gasoline is all far too high. Good news is a hot dog and a Coke at Costco is still $1.50. So if that goes, then we're in real trouble, but that's still the best deal in town. I think we all know that inflation is a worldwide problem, has many causes. I refer to the main causes as the 3 Ps, pandemic, Putin, and price gouging. I think we just talked about the pandemic and what that meant for the supply-demand imbalance. I think it's important we talk about Putin's war in Ukraine. The entire oil production chain and market has been thrown into disarray as a result of the war in Ukraine. If Putin had not started the war, my bet is that gas prices would already be back on their way down had he not gone into Ukraine. The 3rd P is for price gouging, right? Pandemic, Putin, and price gouging. Never underestimate big oil's ability to take advantage of a crisis. The oil companies have been raking in record profits right as we've been trying to get back on our feet. And what I want you to know is that we are acting. We are acting in the Congress. First, we passed the bipartisan infrastructure law to reverse decades of underinvestment in our infrastructure, to modernize our ports, our roads, our bridges, our railways, strengthen our supply chains, and get goods to the markets faster. Second, the Biden administration has released now and will continue to release up to 180 million barrels of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Third, the administration also implemented a trucking action plan to increase the supply of truck drivers by reducing barriers to entry for those interested in becoming a truck driver. Fourth, on Monday, just this past Monday, the House passed something called the Ocean Shipping Reform Act. Again, a broad bipartisan vote to hamper unfair business practices among shipping carriers. The legislation would bring costs down by streamlining the process of getting goods off of vessels and onto store shelves, which is a critical step towards lowering prices. When you dig into the numbers, it is unconscionable what some of these international shipping companies are doing. We are talking 1,000% increase in prices. And many of them, of course, are foreign-owned companies. So we're doing everything we can to hold them to account as well. Number 5, we are getting very close to passing something called the Bipartisan Innovation Act. That'll make our supply chains more resilient and innovative. It'll grow domestic microchip and semiconductor manufacturing. It'll help us make more and invent more in America through investments in regional manufacturing. And this is really, really important. And I want to see us introduce and pass this right around the 4th of July, because I can think of few things that are less patriotic than the United States winning on manufacturing again. So I'm very hopeful we'll pass that right around the 4th of July. Lastly, I want to talk about rising electricity prices in our households and natural gas as well. I wrote a letter to SDG&E. I think everybody in here is probably an SDG&E customer. We are too. we saw a 11% increase in the rates. Then we saw another proposed 9% increase in the rates. We know that 1 out of 4 SDG&E customers right now are behind on their bills, on average over $500. We also know that the executive compensation of the SDG&E executive team was in the tens of millions. And so we're not going to win any friends or influence people. We're not going to win any Dale Carnegie Awards with the folks at SDG&E. But we wrote them a letter demanding that they work with us, not against us, to actually focus on the average ratepayer as opposed to the executive team. And so my hope, my expectation is they're going to work with us, because we've sent them significant resources from the federal government through things called, such as the LIHEAP program, the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, and we need for them to get assistance proactively to those people who need it the most. The average bill, if they get their rate increase, the average bill will be $232 a month. Average bill. Let me also say this. Many of my colleagues are working hard to address rising costs in all the ways that I just mentioned. Far too many in Washington are using people's pain to score political points. It's absolutely wrong. And Senate Republicans right now are sitting on a number of pieces of common sense legislation we've already passed in the House. I'm going to tell you just about 3 of them. First, we passed something called the Lower Food and Fuel Costs Act, just very recently, to reduce our reliance on foreign fertilizer production, extremely important, to lower crop input prices, to strengthen the food supply chain, and to ensure robust competition in the meat and poultry sector. They're just sitting on it over there. Number 2, the House passed an emergency funding bill you may have seen that would give the Food and Drug Administration $28 million to address the nationwide shortage of baby formula, which in part would help the FDA inspect far more formula before it arrives on grocery store shelves to prepare for future shortages, potential shortages. There were 192 House Republicans voted against this funding for baby formula. Third, I'll go back to the big oil companies for a second. Recently, we passed a price gouging bill for big oil. I helped write parts of that bill. It would give the president the power to issue a declaration making it unlawful for energy companies to increase prices that are unconscionably excessive. Unconscionably. That's what I get for writing this stuff late at night. It says unconsciously on my thing. It would also authorize the Federal Trade Commission to enforce those who are violating the act, and we up the penalty to $2 million a day. Because frankly, I've had enough of the big oil companies jacking up prices at the pump and not passing savings along to any of us. And all you have to do is track the price of a barrel of oil, and then you take a look at the price of gasoline, and the two don't add up. And the story that the oil companies are telling, that doesn't add up either. Last year, Exxon made $24 billion with a B, billion, most in 8 years. Chevron made $15.6 billion. Their executives are making out like bandits, and we're all paying the price, and I'm fed up. Are you fed up with that? Yeah. So we're going to do everything we can. Now, why can't the Senate move any of these bills?
Republicans.
These bills are all broadly popular with the American people. If you look at the polling, we're talking about 70, 75, 80% of the American people want to see these bills become law. The problem, to the extent there's one problem, is that big oil and other big corporations are showering too many members of Congress of both parties with campaign contributions. I'm not going to win friends from some in my own party by saying that. Both Congress members and senators. It frustrates me to no end because I'm one of about 40 members of Congress that takes no corporate PAC money, which means the rest do. Thank you. No, another issue on top of mind for so many people is the future of women's health care in this country. The reality is that Congress is going to be confronted with the fact that the Supreme Court is very likely going to overturn a half-century of precedent of Roe versus Wade. And also, we know that some are already using the draft decision, before it's a final decision, to advocate for a nationwide ban on women's reproductive rights. So I want to be crystal clear about where I stand. I will always fight for women's health, including access to contraception and the right to make one's own reproductive choices. I believe that only a woman her family and her doctor should be able to decide what's best for her health. And I'm going to keep fighting to protect that right at the federal level. And well, the Senate has failed to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, and that is incredibly frustrating. We won't give up from doing everything we can in the House to codify Roe versus Wade. Now, I think you have a right to ask candidates and elected officials where they stand on important issues, certainly myself included, particularly on issues important as this, and you have the right to get an honest answer. And I don't expect anyone in here to agree with me on every issue, but I do think you have a right to know where I stand. That also holds true when it comes to addressing the epidemic of gun violence in our country. I am absolutely horrified by recent mass shootings, even just yesterday seeing the church in Alabama. But I have to tell you that as the parent of a 9-year-old and an 8-year-old, it was absolutely horrifying to see the violence in Uvalde, Texas very recently. And when I'm home, I drop my 2 kids off in the morning at school. They go to Capital Unified Schools. Thank you, Amy. And the other morning, that Wednesday, when I dropped them off, I remember the shooting was on a Tuesday. Most mornings I'd drop them off, I'd tell them I love them, and then I'd go about my day, and our kids would go about their day, and I wouldn't think too much of it. But on that morning, I got out of the car, I gave them the biggest hug I'd given them in a long time, and I got back in the car when they left, and I broke down because I was thinking about all those parents who are never going to get to see their kids ever again. I was thinking about those kids who are never going to be able to grow up and do what they dream of doing, the career they're passionate about, or getting married or having children of their own. And for me, that was just a moment where I said, enough is enough. This is insane at this point that we've allowed for this to go on. Over a decade after Sandy Hook, think of it. Think of it. So I am encouraged by what the Senate has done and is continuing to do. I'm, of course, disappointed that they haven't taken the framework that they've talked about and turned it into an actual bill that we can actually read and understand and debate. But nonetheless, pray not only for those families in Uvalde, Texas, and around the country who've been impacted by gun violence. Please pray that they actually get that bill done and that they send it to us this coming week, because we're running out of time. We're running out of time. And as time goes on, the probability of getting a deal done goes down, in my view. So, look, it's not perfect. The bill that the Senate is working on is not perfect, but unquestionably, it will save lives. It will save lives. I've advocated that we go further. I've advocated for an assault weapons ban. I don't want to see weapons of war in our schools and our classrooms. I don't know what the future will hold with regard to future gun violence prevention legislation in the Senate or the House, but I will be fighting every step of the way, and I hope you'll be fighting with me too. A couple of other announcements. Do we have any veterans in the room? Can the veterans raise their hands? Well, I know Stuart. Can we give them a round of applause, please? Thank you. So I'm the Vice Chair of the Veterans Affairs Committee, and I'm really honored to report to you that we had a big breakthrough this past week. Did any of you hear about it? I'm kind of curious because this is a big deal, and I don't know if it even makes the radar of the cable news or the newspaper. So it's called the Honoring Our Pact Act, and that's our pact between our veterans and the civilian community, that when you go off and you serve and you fight for this country and you stand up for the values of this country, that the least we can do is take care of you. The least we can do is ensure that you have good quality medical coverage. And we know from the post 9/11 generation that far too many were exposed to burn pits, and as a result they have had all sorts of health-related challenges related to toxic exposure. And finally, we have a deal to finally take care of our veterans who are exposed to burn pits. So that's a very, very big deal. We passed it in the House a while back. There's no question that I would have loved to have this happen sooner, but the Senate has finally come together with an agreement on their side. They've amended it to an extent. They're sending it back to us for review. We are reviewing it now. We'll be voting on it this coming week. We are going to pass this bill. We're going to sign it into law. I hope to be there at the White House to see this signed into law. It's going to help a lot of veterans out there who are in need of this very important medical care. And it's also an example. In my 3+ years, my experience has been that we can work together and we can help our veterans. We've got 19 of my veterans bills that I have authored along with Republicans across the finish line signed into law, both by the last president and by the current president. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Also this past month, and I'm almost done, I promise. They're going to get mad at me if I keep going. There's just a lot going on. I continue to advocate for something called the Invest to Protect Act this past couple of weeks. It would help the smaller police departments in our district and many others across the country keep our communities safe. So I have seen how this issue, the issue of law enforcement, has pushed many Americans into their ideological corners, and I think that's a shame. I know we can do better than that. I think we can support law enforcement and improve law enforcement at the same time. And in fact, I strongly think those two principles go hand in hand. If we want to make law enforcement better, defunding police is certainly not the answer. I've never supported that. I never will. Instead, I think we should increase funding for police in a way that helps keep them safe, keep our communities safe, help them to do their jobs more effectively, and continue to earn the trust of the communities that they serve. And at a time when law enforcement agencies are confronting higher crime, their budgets have remained stagnant or even been cut, and that's particularly true in smaller cities. That will change if we pass this bipartisan Invest to Protect Act, and I'm very hopeful that we can get it across the finish line soon, and I'm honored to work with many friends and supporters along the way. Finally, I wanted to address the recent hearings on January 6th from the January 6th committee. There was a piece yesterday in the New York Times that I just wanted to read very briefly. I think it sums up my own feelings quite well. And I quote, "The first 3 hearings of the House January 6th committee have deeply undercut, if not demolished, the post-election myths repeated incessantly by former President Donald Trump and his supporters and embraced and amplified by Republicans in Congress. A parade of Republican witnesses, his Attorney General, William Barr, his daughter, Ivanka Trump, and his own campaign lawyers knew he had lost the election and told him so. Mr. Trump was informed that the demands he was making of Mr. Pence to block his defeat unilaterally were illegal. Even the most active coup plotter, the conservative lawyer John C. Eastman, by the way, from Orange County, conceded before January 6th that his scheme was illegal and unconstitutional." This is Eastman. He conceded this. "Then sought a presidential pardon after it led to mob violence. Yet the most striking revelation so far may be how deeply Mr. Trump's disregard for the truth and the rule of law have penetrated into the Republican Party, taking root in the fertile soil of a right-wing electorate stewing in conspiracy theories and well-tended by their media of choice. The Republican response to the hearings, a combination of indifference, diversion, and doubling down, reflects how central the lie of a stolen election has become to the party's identity." I will just close my opening by saying I grew up in South Orange County. I'm raising my kids. My wife and I are raising our kids in South Orange County. And what I see from today's party, the Republican Party, it is not the party of Ronald Reagan. It is not the party of George H.W. Bush. It is not the party of Bob Dole. It is not the party even of Mitt Romney. This is something very different. This is fealty to one person who can't let go of 2020. And I think it's time that collectively, whether you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're an independent, if you're an American, that you stand up for democracy right now in this moment. So, with that, happy to take your questions. Thank you, Misty. And hopefully no one falls asleep in these comfortable chairs.
Okay, so this is kind of an unusual arrangement here. Nobody trip over this wire, please. I'm going to ask you to come over here. Oh, pretty good man. Okay. So numbers 173, 153, and 176. Come join me up here. 153, 173, and 176.
I'm 1
Okay, well, you got the first, so you get to go first.
How are you?
Excellent, and I don't know what to say. You've done a lot, and you keep
Thank you.
fighting away.
Thank you. Give me your name.
I'm Jim Hamilton from
Thanks,
San
Jim.
Clemente.
Thanks.
Mine is fairly lightweight compared to everything else. I'm most interested in the preservation of San Onofre State Park.
Oh, yeah.
It's going smoothly now. We did the 50 years, but I'm looking the next 50 years and beyond. I think it's a nice open space, public access between, as they say, 14 million people on one side and 5 million people on the other. And that's something I would like to see preserved along with open space. So,
It's Jim, right?
Jim.
I'm with you all the way, Jim. So I work closely with folks like Bob Mignona and others to do all we can to help. And we got 3 years. Obviously, it's not enough. We work closely with our friends at the Marine Corps as well and the Pentagon to try to extend it. You know, the whole area, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that the Department of Defense and the Marine Corps did not want a permanent nuclear waste disposal site. There at San Onofre, and there are obviously a series of other land use issues as well. But we've got a very positive working relationship, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that the residents of San Clemente, really the entire region, can enjoy that open space for a long time to come.
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you. I doubt we're going to get as good a deal as that we had in the Nixon era, though,
not at all.
because the law changed that you have to get fair market value, and so that's the challenge, right? So, but we're working on it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hi,
You can't hold it up.
can't hold it. My name is Gerhard Winkler. Actually, I grew up in Europe, in Austria, small
Oh, wow.
country.
Wow.
And,
There you go.
okay, am I talking correctly?
I hear you loud and clear, Gerhard. You're good with me.
Okay. So, and I'm glad that you are here to support democracy, because one of the most famous dictators came from my own country, Adolf Hitler. And I have to say, I'm very concerned about the future of this country. So I beg you to do everything you can to maintain democracy here. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerhard. I'm absolutely in agreement with you. I think that the magnificent forethought of our founders to create our constitutional republic, as incredible as it was not perfect. That's why we always talk about a more perfect union. And what I've recognized in the last just handful of years is that democracy is not something that we can take for granted, nor is it something that we can fail to participate in. I'm deeply concerned when I see, in this past election, last Tuesday, only about 40% of people voted. So the winner was not one candidate or the other. The winner was apathy, right? And as long as that's the case, I mean, we need a participatory democracy, particularly where young people recognize that this is their country, and we all need to play a role and participate. And I've been encouraged, though. I think that there are so many great Americans who want to stand for our institutions, for the rule of law, making sure we've got free and fair elections. And I'm going to just keep doing everything I know to do as one member of 435 in the House of Representatives to try to make sure that we encourage civic participation rather than discourage it. And one good thing, there's actually bipartisan progress in this regard, the idea of funding more civics education. Actually, former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor has been working with a number of people in the House on civics education, and I desperately think we need to do more in that regard. There's a very sad statistic that recently they looked at high school students, and the average high school student that they polled could name more brands of jeans than presidents, right? More brands of jeans then if there are any high school students here, I know you don't fit into that category. I know you can name more presidents. But so long as that's the case, that's a scary time for our constitutional republic or any other. So absolutely. And when you look at what's happening in Ukraine as an example, it's not just about protecting Ukraine. It's about protecting democracy the world over. And it's about trying to work with our friends and our partners around the world to ensure that Ukrainians can live in a democracy, in a stable, constitutional democracy. So I was very encouraged, for example, to see the leaders of the European Union say that they were interested in working with Ukraine to get them into the EU. I'm very hopeful we'll be able to build a bridge there. I'll just close by saying what happens in Ukraine impacts Asia, it impacts Taiwan, it impacts the Middle East, it impacts us all. So that's why we've got to fight really, really hard for democracy there and for democracy here as well. Thank you, Gerhard.
Thank you, sir.
Someone out there has either 173 or 176 and didn't make it up. So in the meantime, I'll take 3 other tickets. Okay, 158, 166, and 164.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Myrna Dayan. So I'm new, moved to California, and the industry I work in is manufacturing, helping manufacturing companies be more energy efficient.
Oh, great.
So something that I see and I hear from a lot of my customers is, manufacturing is so expensive. We don't know if we can stay in the California area. We don't know if we can stay in the LA area.
Yeah.
How do we, what's the solution? I mean,
Well, and specifically, what type of manufacturing are you involved with?
industrial manufacturing, so anything that's in the industrial category.
Well, I think there's no one easy answer to bringing manufacturing jobs back, but we have to try a lot of different things and know that we're far better off having made the effort. So what we're trying to do right now with the Bipartisan Innovation Act is to bring specific industries like semiconductors and microchips back to the United States that we've lost mostly to Asia. I would love to see for Southern California to be a hub for clean energy companies to be able not only to innovate but to manufacture the clean energy technologies of the future. So we're working very hard through the bipartisan infrastructure law on making Southern California one of those regional innovation hubs to bring a lot of those federal dollars to bear. I think there are other things. Obviously, tax policy. I'm very cognizant of things like the state and local tax deduction. So in 2017, when the SALT tax the deduction was capped at $10,000, there were a whole lot of people who were middle-class people, who were entrepreneurs, small business owners, people making those strategic decisions about where they wanted to locate a company or grow a business. And to see that cap in place, it dramatically hurt a lot of people in this district. We've got about 62% of our district that own a home. The average price of a home in the district is rapidly approaching $1 million. If you pay 1% or 1.5% for your property taxes, you blow through your $10,000 cap right there. So one priority for me has been to try to lift or remove the SALT cap altogether. We voted on removing it altogether as a standalone bill in the House, and we passed it in the House. It was a very unique coalition. It was a geographic coalition rather than an ideological coalition. It's actually the only time it's happened in my 3 years in Congress where it was on the issue of the SALT cap, because cities like states like California, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Connecticut, they all got the short end. And I would argue that the last administration was trying to punish states like ours. It was on purpose. It was on purpose. And unfortunately, they have succeeded in punishing. So what we got in the most recent reconciliation bill, which is sitting on a shelf somewhere in the U.S. Senate, is increasing the cap to 9 years at $80,000 a year. So 80 grand would be a whole lot better than 10. So those are some examples of things that I think we need to do to try to position California. Now, obviously, what they do in Sacramento is independent of what I do here. I'll stop there. I don't want to run afoul of my time. Yes, I can keep going and going and going. Just ask my wife. She'll tell you I can keep talking. That's right.
Okay, so somebody out there has 166 and 164.
166. Okay. Don't touch the mic. I got that.
You just can't hold it.
Okay. I'm Wilma Wilson. I'm from San Clemente. And I really didn't write anything down. My thoughts are kind of all over the place. But I was glad you quoted that article out of the Times, because the first part went along with what everyone's thinking, but the second part, the fact that people could watch these hearings and then come away with, oh, it really didn't happen or whatever, it's really just unbelievable that they're so entrenched. So I was going to comment on that, but you already did. The other thing is, I think the Democrats, all the good stuff you were saying that's been happening, I don't think that information just gets out. I watch a lot of news, take a lot of papers, and I think someone in D.C. has got to be the spokesperson to get these good things out. That information is not getting out. And if Biden is too busy or whatever, someone else needs to step up to the plate and do that. I mean, I know he's older and doesn't have quite as much energy, but I mean, I really think the information needs to get out there, because it's not.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm younger and I got plenty of energy.
Okay, I know you do.
So
You can be the
I'm
one.
not running for anything other than this office, but I got plenty. I got 140 days or something. We're going to get out there every day and talk about it.
Okay, the other thing, I was very disappointed. I love the hearings that are going on, but I was hoping they were going to be done before the midterms, so that maybe some of the primaries would have gone a different way. Some of the people that got elected on the Republican side is just, I mean, they can't even put a sentence together, and they refuse to debate. And these are the people that are going to be there, and they're so entrenched. I'm very disheartened. And the other thing is, I just think the Democrats are playing too nice.
You got to go a little faster.
Too nice. They're just too nice. They need to just get that rougher side, because if they're not that way now, it's going to, it's going to be too late. It's going to be too late.
Let me address. Thank you so
But
much,
see,
Wilma,
my
for
thoughts
the-
all over the
Yes. Right. So, with regard to the hearings, I think it is, the evidence is so obvious and overwhelming if you actually have watched any of it, that the only rebuttals that I've heard, because I really wanted to see what Fox News and what folks were saying that disagreed with these hearings. And what I hear a lot of is process argument. Well, Jim Jordan's not there, and it's only Kinzinger and Cheney are the only Republicans. I don't hear anything on the substance of what is being discussed and what is being presented, because it's Trump's inner circle that is on record, on video, or testifying live about what happened, or other people that have a long history of involvement in the Republican Party. And so I think that's very significant. And for me personally, I have to tell you that it's not only distressing, it is offensive when I hear that people are saying that it didn't happen. I was in the Capitol complex that day. We were in our office. We were set to go watch the proceedings, stayed in our office when we saw what was happening. And I don't know if you saw the video of Loudermilk, one of my colleagues who was giving the tour. I'll tell you something, if y'all ever come to visit me in the Capitol, I will be delighted to give you a tour, but I would not recommend that you take out your cell phone and start taking videos of the hallways and looking at the directories, and that's not a tour. And I hope that we hold him to account as well, because he lied and said that he didn't give any tours on January 5th, but the tapes speak for themselves. And if you remember, very shortly after January 6th, one of my colleagues from New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill, herself a veteran and really great colleague, we worked on a letter. I think there were about 30 of us that signed on this letter saying, look, there were colleagues of ours who gave tours the day before. Capitol Police, look into it. Department of Justice, look into it. And at the time, we were all criticized. There was an ethics complaint filed by the Republicans against the people that signed the letter because they said it was unfounded and speculative and all the rest. But it obviously wasn't. It obviously did really happen. And I can tell you, I was there. I heard it. I saw it. You could see it out the window. It was an awful, awful day. And I really think it's important that moving forward, 30 seconds, she's got me. Moving forward, we've got to at least be playing by accepting the same set of facts, right?
Okay, Wes, you're up. Thank you. 167, 177, and 152.
Okay, hi. Okay, as the most proactive representative for education in all the 49th, we have never had anybody like this ever. I was going to ask you about fully funding, IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and or infrastructure, for our schools. But you brought up Invest to Protect. So I have a two-part there.
You bet.
First part, our school districts, now different states do it differently. In CUSD, we depend on our SROs, our school resource officers. We do not have the money to fund them. They are funded, if we're lucky, by our cities. San Clemente does, Mission Viejo does, Dana Point does, Laguna Niguel does not, so on and so forth. So I'm wondering if that is in the Invest to Protect. Next, we also have had a challenge, and I don't expect this to happen again, where our law enforcement, our Orange County sheriffs, developed a policy that put our children at risk. So I knew as a school board member that a sheriff would not take out someone who had a problem with masks. So when they were losing it in our boardroom, we had private orange vest folks to be there to help them move along, because their policy was if it had to do with masks, they would not engage. The challenge is we had young people that were getting caught up and upset and motivated to act against our school policies on school campuses. So whereupon we actually had a full day where a young man, basically he went berserk, and we follow all policies. We called the SROs. He came back on campus. The gentleman, our officers said, we will do nothing because it's about masks. For an entire,
Sorry, what's your question?
I'll get to it. I feel this is kind of interesting. I don't know. For an entire day, this is a new act. I'm sorry, I will get to it. Obviously, it's very emotional for me. And we had no backup. For an entire day, we had no help. We at one point called the highway patrolman. So, long story short, they finally decided, okay, if a principal did A, B, C, or D. But you have to realize during the day, erroneously, people said it was mask generated and we had other issues. So, I don't believe in defunding the police either. I believe in giving them resources whereupon for mental health and so on and so forth. In the Invest to Protect, high level, I'll read it. Are we looking at covering anything about schools? Sorry, that was the question.
That's great. Thank you.
That is not what that bill is designed to do. It's designed for departments of 200 or less to get them things like de-escalation, mental health training, other resources that they need to be able to do their jobs more effectively that are often overlooked. Because South Orange County is covered by the sheriff, then we'd have to figure out an alternative methods. But I have a couple of ideas in that regard. One is this bipartisan gun violence prevention legislation is supposed to have quite a substantial sum in there for hardening of physical campuses, for school campuses. So we ought to follow up once we see what's in this bill. The second is we can always submit a community project funding request to try to work with you on that, try to work with Capital Unified and the Sheriff's Department on that. Sure. So
sorry, I got emotional.
No. Let's continue the discussion. I'll say very briefly that on funding for school infrastructure, it's one area that we didn't go far enough in the bipartisan infrastructure law. We had $100 billion for school construction in our House reconciliation bill. Again, that's sitting in the Senate somewhere. I fully support not only full funding for IDEA, special education, but also doing everything we can for higher education and doubling the Pell Grant. So you hear this whole argument about debt forgiveness, right? And sometimes what you will hear, often what I will hear from my Republican friends is, that shouldn't be the focus. The focus ought to be on the cost of higher education. To which I say, okay, let's double the Pell Grant. Right now the Pell Grant goes to people who really need it. It's about $6,500. If you doubled it to $12,000, $13,000, it would make a huge difference in higher education opportunities all across the country. Thank you, Amy, for the excellent question. Yeah, we keep going on education.
Thank you.
Okay,
How are you?
I'm fine. I'm Mike Glaze from Dana Point.
Great.
My question is fairly short for you, I hope. Can you share with us some of the timeline highlights that we have for decommissioning San Onofre?
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Mike, for the question. This has been, for me, one of the most difficult, but also one of the most important things that I've been working on over the last 3 years. So there's the actual decommissioning of the power plant itself, taking the domes down and removing much of the surrounding material. That will happen within the next handful of years. I think Southern California Edison's timeline suggests that it'll happen certainly this decade, but we are left with the nuclear waste. That's the challenge. So they can decommission all the rest, they can send it off to Utah, low-level radioactive waste. What they can't figure out yet, and I'm trying to help them, is where to send the spent nuclear fuel. And that is the symptom of a bigger problem. The bigger problem is we've got nowhere to send any of the spent nuclear fuel from any of the power plants anywhere in the United States. And I've done a number of things to try to solve that challenge. Most significantly, we created a bipartisan spent nuclear fuel solutions caucus with myself and a gentleman named Rodney Davis, Republican from Illinois, and we're working on a number of measures, including one called the Spent Fuel Prioritization Act, which says for all of the nation's nuclear waste, once we've figured out where we're going to move it, move first the waste that is in those areas with the highest population density, the highest seismic risk, and the highest national security concerns. Guess what? We win. We win. We have 9 million people within 50 miles. We have 2 active earthquake faults, and we've got Camp Pendleton across the street. Not the ideal place to store nuclear waste. Number 2 is last year and this year, we got $20 million each year, so 40 total, for the Department of Energy to restart something called Consolidated Interim Storage. And what they are doing, Jennifer Granholm, our Secretary of Energy, came out to San Onofre and announced for the first time in the recent history of the United States that the federal government would directly compensate one or more communities willing to take spent nuclear fuel that are in a more remote location that could handle it, that didn't have earthquakes and 9 million people and a base next door. And so we are making more progress in the last year on this issue than they've made in the decade prior. And I'm really proud of that work, and we've got to keep it going.
Okay, we'll do 3 more, Wes. Oh.
All right.
That's okay. Thank you.
Sure.
How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Good.
My name is Gail Hamilton, and I was a counselor in Oceanside Unified School District for quite a number of years, and I retired at 38 years a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic. Thank you, Lord. But the counselors are having a tough time, and I'm thrilled to hear about your ban on assault weapons. I certainly hope we can get that through. Nobody needs an assault weapon. I'm all for people having the right to own a gun, but nobody needs that. You don't go hunting with one of those. So, no, let's get rid of those. But also, and SROs are a great idea too. I'm all for that. But please, let's fund the counselors, because they are really the people in the trenches who work with students and can stop a lot of those things before they happen.
Yeah.
But we need to have them in there. And right now, they are a luxury and not something that is a given. A psychologist is a federally mandated person on campus. A counselor's not. The minute budget cuts happen, we're gone. So there's no job security. You're not going to get good people, and we don't have enough. So please, fight for counselors.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much. So you would have no way of knowing this, but my brother-in-law is a school counselor up in Oregon, and it's an incredibly tough job, and you are overworked and underpaid. and the burdens that you carry with you from all of the people, all the young people and the families that you're working with can be very difficult. What I will also say is, just as when Amy asked about the school funding, just the same mental health funding, there's supposed to be robust mental health funding for schools, specifically for schools in this gun violence prevention package. And once they actually have the text, we can review it and we can see how we can help some of our local schools, because it's on my mind too. And the last couple of years has been really stressful, as you correctly stated, for all of our teachers, all of our parents, and all of our students. Many were, in our family, again, a 9-year-old and 8-year-old, they were home for a better part of a year, looking at Zoom and Chromebooks the entire time. I tell you, when the school reopened, there were probably very few families happier than our family to get them back to school, get them back in the class. But that took an enormous toll on everybody in the community. And so you add the gun violence issue. When I was growing up here, we would have earthquake drills, right? Now they have active shooter drills. It's unconscionable. This is my 9 and 8-year-old that have to deal with this stuff. So, no, I thank you so much for the great work that you did as a counselor. And I will, personally try to do everything I can to help our schools deal with the mental health issues. The last thing I'll say is that when you hear about gun violence prevention and you hear some people say it's just a mental health issue, well, no, but it is a mental health issue also, right? So we can't forget about mental health. We need common sense reforms around gun violence prevention that include mental health, addressing mental health. Thank you.
Okay, 168, 163, and 174.
How are you doing?
Good, are you?
Come on down.
Good.
My name is David Velasquez. I am a resident of Dana Point. I am a student at Cal State Fullerton. We actually met at the Rancho Santa Fe 4th of July parade about 4 years ago. give or
Terrific.
take. Yeah, I'm not sure if you remember me. I look quite different.
No.
But
I've got more gray hair now than I used to.
yeah, that it. So basically, long story short, not too long ago, I was actually admitted to a psychiatric hospital due to a couple of mental health conditions, and I'm on the road to slowly recover. And ever since then, I've been a huge advocate for mental health. It made me realize that a lot of people on these positions of power or authority figures or celebrities are just human. And we all have emotions at the end of the day. And, we don't need another Paul Gosar tweeting on Twitter attacking AOC. We don't need, another shooter targeting the governor of Michigan. So my question to you is less political, I guess, and more humane. How do you personally deal with all the backlash? How do you personally cope with all the hate in the world?
First of all, David, I want to thank you for being here and for the courage that you have in getting up there and telling us all what you just told us. Not easily. It's a tough environment out there. I try to limit my social media consumption. For one, I was telling Adam, I don't know where Adam went, our great campaign manager, that on your iPhone you can keep applications but remove them from your home screen, right? So you still have them, but you don't have to look at them all the time. I did that with Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. It's like the best decision I've made in a while. So they're still there. I can still post to those sites, and I do, probably too often. But I think it's important to explain what we're doing out there in the community. But sitting there, doom scrolling what people are saying is not healthy, right? That's not a good thing. Trying to just turn the screen off as much as I can. Trying to spend more time with our loved ones and our friends, not just looking at a screen. Making sure that we're getting enough rest and trying to exercise and eat well and all the rest. So there's no one thing, but I think we have so much coming at us in this society right now. The news is a mile a minute, and if you're getting your news on social media exclusively, I would just say don't do that because you're probably getting, first of all, you're getting a very biased view of the world. It's important that we get a diversity of perspectives in the media that we consume. And then second, just try to lower that screen time. And it's obviously, I don't always pull that off, because the job I have requires me to always be looking at that phone. But I think there is a direct correlation, personally, between how I feel and between how much time I'm spending on that phone, and particularly on social media. Thank you, David. Thank you. Good job. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ken Gilliland, San Clemente.
Hi, Ken.
My concern is, and you kind of touched on this, the threat of democracy or loss of it, the voting rights. We're seeing this throughout the country and at congressional levels. Recently in New Mexico, we saw what happened. What can the federal government do to protect us, to make sure that we can vote?
Absolutely, Ken. So first thing I'll say, I am happy to be a Californian where we actually have a Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber, that believes that if you're legally eligible to vote, it ought to be easier to vote, not harder. Right? I wish that were the case in all 50 states. We know it's not. We know that in some states they're doing everything they can to actively undermine the right to vote. But I actually have some reason for optimism, because you might have seen the recent election result in Georgia, where Brad Raffensperger, who stood up to former President Trump and would not give in and would not lie or try to undermine or overturn the result of a free and fair election in the state of Georgia, what happened? He was overwhelmingly reelected in a very conservative state, in the state of Georgia. It gives me hope for other states. And I hope that everybody that watches these hearings, the January 6 hearings, including those who are secretaries of state or local or county elections officials all across the country, I hope that they will recognize just how absurd the opinion is that there's this massive widespread fraud all across the country, and that foreign countries are rigging the vote and all these different things, when you just got to look at the evidence, and it's just you either accept the evidence or you don't accept the evidence. So I'm actually more hopeful that I hope Sunlight is antiseptic in this regard. Now, what are we doing at the federal level? Well, we passed the For the People Act a couple of times, H.R. 1, that would really, I think, set good national standards for state and local elections officials to follow, to make it easier. Again, if you are legally eligible to vote, we want you to vote, right? I think back to why my grandfather fought in World War II against tyranny. One of the things was to protect free and fair elections in the United States of America, so that we would not turn in to an autocracy, so that we would stand up for the average person and give them a voice in the political process. That was part of the genius of our founders and part of the genius of the Constitution. So the For the People Act, H.R. 1, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and other legislation, we're going to need to do quite a lot more in the months ahead. And I look forward to the January 6th committee, which, in addition to their mandate to uncover the facts and to educate the American people on what happened on that day, they also are going to be recommending legislation, including around the Electoral Count Act and other provisions that will hopefully prevent something like we saw on January 6th from ever happening again. I'm going to keep fighting for our democracy, and I'm very encouraged that I think a lot of you will too. Thank you.
Congressmember Levin.
Hi, Stuart.
Hello.
Now, Stuart, I know. I always joke, they say, oh, the people are planted. No, but I know Stuart. I didn't know he was going to ask a question, but I know Stuart very well.
Thank you for the kindness of introducing me to the Secretary of VA. Really appreciated that.
Of course.
My question is, I've heard some rumblings in La Jolla that although there are job openings, they're not being actively recruited.
Huh.
I don't know the veracity of that because my sample was fairly small. At La Jolla.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be nice if you looked into that. Is this an official event or is this a campaign event?
It's a campaign event.
Oh, goody.
Yeah.
I don't know about anybody else in the room, but this man has represented us in an exemplary manner. He's the hardest working man I ever met. Oh. And between now and November, we need to do some simple things, phone canvassing, face-to-face. Can we give money through the website?
Sure.
I'm happy. Thank you, Congressman Levin.
Thank you. I didn't know he was going to say any of that, but I will gladly take all those compliments on behalf of our wonderful team. What I will say about the San Diego VA is we work very closely with them, and to a lesser extent in Long Beach. But San Diego VA is actually in our district, and our VA medical director, Robert Smith, is actually retiring. It's a big loss for our community because he's been there 14 years, and he's a tremendous advocate for our veterans. So I know they're actively in the process of trying to find that next medical director. So I'll be happy to follow up and look into what you're talking about. What I will say is this, is that I'm always going to stand up and fight to protect and strengthen the VA healthcare system, not undermine it and privatize it. And you should demand that out of your representative. And the reality is it's not perfect, it's a big bureaucracy, absolutely true, but there are an awful lot of people working incredibly hard, and we're always trying to improve things. And I'm really proud of a lot of the bipartisan work that we've done in that regard. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you.
Number 157, 156, and 178. Come on down. I don't have a prize for you, though, except for your question to the Congressman.
Thanks for coming. They're going to shop, I think, or watch Top Gun, I guess. Going to watch a movie.
Come on.
How are you?
How are you? My name is Celia. I've written so many questions, but I'm going to go into just one.
You got it.
In the invest and protect, okay, when you talk about police reform, I would really rather see more social workers and more chaplains as a team when they go out, because police were not trained to do social worker job, and their job, when they run into the community is experiencing a whole lot of what we call cultural deterioration. So it's not their job, but it's the social worker and the chaplain's job. By the way, I'm a chaplain. Cool. So that need to be a team. So I don't know that's part of the plan or not, because every time something happens, they keep saying mental health, mental health. It's a whole health.
Yeah.
All right, so we can't just talk about it.
Yeah.
And we can't just throw money. We need to have people on the ground.
I agree.
Unfortunately, right now, across the United States, not too many police departments have a team like that. Well, so just same thing like asking the teachers to take care of children in such a broad way. That's not their job either.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Celia, and that's absolutely part of the plan. Absolutely. No, the idea is that you'd provide the resources necessary for our local police to be able to better partner with mental health professionals and to be able to
be trained too. They're not
right, so to be able to go through the requisite and necessary training, things like de-escalation as well. So dash cams, body cams, there's a lot of good stuff that we're working on, but it takes a team, right? It takes a team, and so that's what we're all about. Thank you so much, Celia. Thank you. Oh, you got to tell everybody what you're running for.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Carr. I'm a council member in Huntington Beach, and I'm running for State Senate, which represents all of coastal Orange County. Thank you. So it goes from San Clemente to Seal Beach, so basically from lower Trestles all the way up to the River Jetty, and then it goes as far north into Artesia and Cerritos. So a little bit bigger district than yours. It's 988,000 people, but it's just truly an honor. So I have a question for you.
Yes.
Well, first, and this was not staged, I was looking at this, and I was just blown away at your accomplishments. Coming from a district where we had a congressman who had been there for 30 years, if I didn't know better, I would have thought you had been in office for 30 years. And I'm looking at this going, you've only been in office for 3.5 years. So when you say that you are a workhorse and not a show horse, the proof is in the receipts right here. I mean, this is impressive. So thank you so much for all that you do. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. Last year I was the mayor of Huntington Beach during the oil spill. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that because so often as, you know, working on the local level, we were told this is a federal issue, this is a federal issue. And so going down this path, and I know that San Clemente was affected by the oil spill, not quite as hard as we were in Huntington Beach, but I wanted to get your thoughts on accountability, holding these people responsible for it, and then possibly decommissioning these offshore rigs as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Kim. So first of all, Kim is a fantastic candidate. You should definitely get to know Kim. I introduced legislation. So we know that we had 25,000 gallons that made their way, and I actually flew up on a helicopter with Katrina Foley, and we went all the way down the coast, and we saw it started up in Huntington Beach, Long Beach area, went all the way down past Dana Point, past San Clemente, all the way down to San Diego County. They're picking up tar balls as far south as Del Mar, even Coronado. And so I pushed very hard for something called the American Oceans and Coast Protections Act, Coastal Protection Act, and it would basically ban offshore drilling off the Southern California coast. And we got it in the House Reconciliation Bill. That was no small feat. We passed it in the House. And it was really, really tough because I've got a lot of colleagues, Democrats from Texas and from some other places where they want to see more offshore drilling, more drilling, period. But what I told them, and I think what resonated with them, and what makes us different, is that the entirety of what we get in terms of oil from the coast of Southern California is a drop in the bucket, literally, compared to what we need. It's about what we use in 1/3 of one day. On the other hand, the economic risk to our coastal community, to our local economy, there's 140,000 people that work in coastal tourism, the coastal economy, just in Orange and San Diego counties. About $7 billion of economic activity per year. And when you shut down the coast, when you shut down the beaches, when you shut down Dana Point Harbor, when you shut down the hotels, when you shut down all the recreational activities in the fishing industry, that is a real problem. Real problem. So there are plenty of other, even if you are the most pro-fossil fuel, which I am not, far from it, definitely far from it. There are so many places where it makes more sense than to foul our coastline. Now, we sent it over to the Senate, and our friend from West Virginia, Mr. Manchin, did not like this provision at all. No. I would boo some other people. We need Manchin on a number of things to work with us, not against us. But on this one, he's not with us. So the reality is that, I'll go quick, we have a fundamental decision to make right now. This is an inflection point. Are we going to continue to double down on the dirty energy policies of the past, where dictators like Putin have far too much control over things like gasoline prices? Or are we actually going to accelerate the transition to a more sustainable future? Better for the planet, better for the economy, better for all of us as consumers? I think it's a pretty simple question. And that's what I'm committed to doing. Thank you.
3 more. (171), 165, and 162. Wes, are we getting down to the end of the questions? We got a few left. Okay.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Doris Hale from San Clemente. Thank you, doing
Doris.
a very good job for us.
Thank you.
This is a very simple question. Is this country ever going to get rid of the Electoral College?
Not easily, Doris. Not easily. So I think the Electoral College will certainly be there for the foreseeable future. I know there are efforts for a state pact, for states to have a pact around a national popular vote. I can certainly tell you as a Californian, I'd love for our influence to grow, and obviously a national popular vote would dramatically enhance that. The reality that you've got 2 senators in California, 2 senators in New York, and then 2 senators in Montana and Idaho and Wyoming. Nothing against Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, or Rhode Island, or whomever, but we are one of the largest economies in the world, just this state of California. And so, again, very tough to fix that or to change that, but ultimately when you have a majority, right now you have a 50-50 Senate where those 50 Republican members are representing somewhere in the mid-30, high 30% of the overall population. That isn't very equitable. Now again, the founders were brilliant, though, in how they engineered and the compromises that they made around a bicameral legislature. And of course, you've got proportional representation in the House of Representatives. But I think there's great merit to the idea of a national popular vote, but very, very tough to do. And constitutional amendments are virtually let's just say they're highly improbable. They're highly unlikely to get done anytime soon. And that's not only when it comes to national popular vote, that's with regard to any number of proposed constitutional amendments.
Yes, ma'am.
Audie Sterla from San Clemente. My question concerns the January 6th commission. It's more about the Republican members. I was talking on the phone with a friend, and she said that the hearings might be more palatable to Republicans if there were more Republicans on the commission. I can understand why certain Republicans were not on it, but how were the commission members selected, and we only have 2 Republicans on the commission?
Great question. It's Audie, right?
Yes.
Yes. So what had happened, Audie, is that John Katko, a Republican from New York, worked with Benny Thompson, the Democrat who you may have seen as the chairman of the committee. Katko is the Republican ranking member on the Homeland Security Committee, and they worked out a deal where it was going to be an independent commission, sort of like the 9/11 Commission. Everybody remember the 9/11 Commission? Where it would have been independent. You would have had a proportional number, equal number of Democrats and Republicans. They would have had to agree in order to issue subpoenas. And the Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, and the House Republicans voted that down, right? They voted that down. So they would not accept a bipartisan commission that was truly independent and truly had equal joint power. Now, what happened next was the Speaker said, okay, we're going to move forward with a select committee. And the Republicans selected the most outrageous, the most partisan members, the Jim Jordans of the world, to serve. And at the end of the day, the decision was made that the committee's work needed to proceed. And in the absence of an agreement on an independent commission, the way that Katko had worked on, and that actually they had agreed to for a while before they pulled back, the Speaker and leadership decided to move forward with Liz Cheney and with Adam Kinzinger, 2 very fair, very pragmatic patriots who I think are putting their country before their party, particularly for Cheney in a very difficult environment back in Wyoming, where I think she is putting her own belief and service for her country above her potential of winning re-election, which I think is something that is very unusual these days in Congress. Now, would it be better if there were equal number of Democrats and Republicans? I would say absolutely, if you had fair and open-minded and honest Republicans on the committee, right? So I'd personally be great with that. Now, the challenge is that there aren't very many who want to stand forward and stand up to this former president right now. So all of that being said, I would just say to your friend, the work of the committee should stand for itself, and the witnesses that they're bringing and the testimony that they're getting and they're presenting to the American people and the documentary evidence that they're showing, it is mostly Republicans, including Trump's former campaign manager, Trump's former attorney general, Trump's daughter, Trump's son-in-law, these other folks that were all very much on the inner circle. And when they literally, within the Trump campaign, they said they had the sane team and the crazy team, right? Did you all catch that? Right?
Normal team.
The normal team and the crazy team, right? I would just let the facts speak for themselves. If people would just watch or listen or read about what they've said, rather than the process arguments, we'd all be better off. Thank you. Hi, how are you?
Pretty good. Hi, Congressman. I'm Dennis Benjamin.
Hi, Dennis.
I liked your 3P points earlier. Is there anyone in the Democratic Party, like at the Democratic National Committee, trying to come out with a unified message so that when a congressional candidate like yourself or a Senate candidate for the Democrats or President Biden is out speaking, that they hit the same points and there would be some unity in messaging?
Well, Dennis, they're trying, but it's the old Will Rogers quote, I don't belong to an organized political party, I am a Democrat, right? So it is a challenge because we are a Big Ten party, There are over 200 of us in the House. There are 200 different districts in the country, and I acknowledge fully what I communicate here in Southern California might not be ideal for one of my colleagues in Michigan or in another part of the country, in Florida or in the Midwest, wherever it might be, right? And so we each have the, I think, opportunity to have the best message as possible for our constituents. And I try to do a lot of listening. You know, my grandma said I had 2 ears and 1 mouth and I should use them accordingly. So a lot of it is listening in forums like this and house parties that we have very frequently, and interactions on the phone. I called scores of our constituents leading up to last Tuesday, and I hear an extraordinary amount of frustration, but also an acknowledgement that a lot of it has to do with the price gouging from big oil, the price gouging from others that unfortunately, like our shipping companies and so forth, that are taking advantage of this opportunity. And there's also a great degree of frustration around those who would use the pain that people are feeling for simply for political gain. And that's what I heard from a lot of constituents. And so when I go out and I speak, I'm going to do everything I can to just, again, to talk about the truth, talk about what the pandemic has done, talk about what Putin's war in Ukraine has done, and yes, talk about what the price gouging of some companies have done as well. All right. Thank you, Dennis.
So we have,
Thank you.
we have time for 2 more questions, number 169 and 155.
We'll go shopping afterwards. That sound good? For those watching at home, we are in a mall right now. We're in a very, very nice room in a mall.
I promise not to go on my way out.
Petty Van Reekum, San Clemente.
Thank you, Patty.
Following up on the January 6th hearings, most of my friends are watching, and probably everybody in the room is watching. I'll tell you that we're feeling like if the Justice Department doesn't indict Trump, that anybody can get away with anything. We're really feeling, so my question to you is, how are the Congress people feeling about the possibility of indicting Trump?
Well, I hope that one of the people watching among the 20 million is Merrick Garland.
Yeah.
And look, I think that the president, in choosing Secretary Garland, decided, or Attorney General Garland, I should say, decided that he wanted to get away from the politicization of the Justice Department as it was under Bill Barr, and he made a choice as somebody that he thought would be at arm's length from the politics. Now, I do think that there's an arm's length, and there's many football fields of length. And my hope is that he recognizes that it's fairly obvious the case that's been laid out. So far, we're only 3 hearings in. There's going to be 4 more. And I hope that they will take that information. I'm encouraged that they've asked now the committee for all of their documents and all of their materials to the extent that they can be committed without violating any of the confidentiality agreements that were put in place by the committee. And they're going to take it and they're going to do whatever the facts and the law require, they must do. Because you cannot have rule of law if that rule of law doesn't apply to everyone, including somebody who loses an election, lies about it, incites an insurrection, and continues. And by the way, $250 million in grift after this, right? Yeah. And that's, by the way, that's what I saw as the link between the crazy team and the sane team. They all were on the take, right? Oh, yeah. They like Bill Stepien, you saw him, they were all making an extraordinary amount of money. So I think that narrative is one that if I were Merrick Garland, I would be moving forward. Now, what I worry about, some people might dispute this, they might think that it won't happen, but I think there's a fair chance that Trump will announce his plan for getting back in office, right, soon, like maybe within the next few weeks. The sooner that he does it, the more he can say that whatever Garland does is just politically motivated. So stay tuned.
But my question was, how are the congressmen feeling about this?
Oh, the Congress. Well, it depends on who, right? So we're not we're of differing opinions. But I can tell you where I've been, and I obviously think it's fairly obvious that we've had multiple indictable offenses now, right? And it's just a matter of anybody willing to open their eyes and open their ears and just look and hear, how people can reach a different conclusion based on facts and evidence, I think is pretty difficult at this point.
Congressman, you were
Yep.
tipped off. You only had 2 questions,
Uh-oh.
and we are now at the last question.
All right.
So I'm just going to give you a few little bits of information because I know that you're not going to stick around after this question is answered. There were comment cards on each one of your seats when you arrived. If you could please fill those out because in fact I do read all of them and I take your feedback to try to make the next town hall better. So if you could do that, if you need a pen, we do have some pens up here we can provide for you. Also want to thank you all for being here and thank all the volunteers that participate to make this happen without knocking Rachel over. And so again, thank you to all the volunteers here. I couldn't do any of this without you. And I just lost my train of thought then.
If you didn't get your question answered.
If you didn't get your question answered, you could please send it to townhall@mikelevin.org. We will get those answered for you. And really appreciate again you being here, taking the time today. You were going to say something with And that is right, I was going to tell you. The people down in the California Welcome Center were very gracious with us today, and if you could all just please tell them thank you for everything they did to welcome us and to make this a really great venue for us today. They would appreciate the thanks. I'm sure they probably don't get enough of that, and yours will go a long way today as well.
Thank you. And thanks to Misty, everybody.
Thank you, Misty.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, you're the last question.
I'm lucky. I'm very lucky.
How you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm Stephen Hill. I'm a rental property owner in San Clemente and in South Orange County, apartment buildings and houses. And I want to thank you for being part of giving the state of California the money to pay the rent for people that can't because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
The problem that I have is that it sounds very good on the news. It sounded very good, I'm sure, for the federal government. But as a recipient of that money, eventually, hopefully, for people that can't pay their rent, I'm not getting it.
Yeah.
And when I do, it's months.
Yeah.
And those months are money out of my pocket. The government, California government, federal government, is asking me to pay the rent for COVID-19 people that can't pay, which I've been doing. So I guess what I'm asking is thank you very much for getting California the money. I appreciate it very much, but only here to say that the state of California isn't doing their job. And neighborly isn't doing their job. And my question of you, I'm finally getting to my question, is can the federal government, can you do something to police the states to make sure that they do their job efficiently, A? And B, this money that you are giving them, I'm not sure that they're really giving it out to rent relief. I think they're using it for other programs. What can the federal government do about that?
Well, it's tremendously frustrating. So, Stephen, you're absolutely not alone in that concern. What I would recommend is let me get your contact information and we can connect you with our South Orange County office. And we can either open a case or we can figure out what's going on. We also have great working relationships with our local legislators at the state level, so we can inquire with them. This was, obviously when you do anything the magnitude, you have anything the magnitude of COVID-19, you try to put programs in that help people. You hope the money is getting to where it needs to get, but we know that it's an imperfect system, right? It's an imperfect process, particularly in a state as large as California. But I'd love to follow up with you because I absolutely hear loud and clear from many of our landlords that this has been a huge challenge. But I thank you for what you are doing to try to work with those tenants as best you can. And my hope is that many of them are now back out there participating in the economy, able to pay rent again. That's my hope.
It's my hope too.
Excellent. Well, let me say a couple things in closing. First of all, I hope you enjoyed this afternoon. I want to thank everybody at the Outlets of San Clemente for making this space available to us. I want to encourage you all, if you're interested, to help out. So we've got a campaign office in Laguna Niguel. It is just waiting for more volunteers. If you're interested in making calls or knocking on doors or stuffing envelopes, we have things that you can do if you want to interact with as many people as you'd like or as few. It is an amazing, amazing group of people that volunteer for our campaign, and we'd really love your help. We'd also love your feedback because we do these town halls every single month. We'll have the announcements of where we're going to be doing July and on through the rest of the year very soon. If you're interested in volunteering on these town halls, you know, it's a great volunteer effort each and every month. Finally, I just want to thank you again for just coming out. There are any number of things that you could be doing this afternoon, but because you are here, I hope that it is a reflection of your belief, just as I believe, that we're only able to keep this democracy strong when we all participate in it. So with that, if my wife and kids or in-laws or parents are watching this, hello and I love you. Again, happy Father's Day to all the dads, and we'll see you in July. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for coming, Cheryl. Nice to see you.